this point is clear that we now always rent everything. We rent all our cars. 90% of all cars in the UK are rented. Everything has a finance cost implicit within it. We're paying interest, we're paying charges, we're paying rents. This is about extracting profit from working people. Working people's incomes might rise, but actually the capacity to pay those or the capacity to have a good life based upon that income is constrained by the desire to pay rent, whether that be literally for housing or via the interest rate on your mortgage for housing, or whether it is because so much of what you live on is rented, your phone, your everything. And this is the economy that changed. We are now living in a world which exists apparently to extract rent from us all the time. And AI is just another iteration of this. What is AI going to end up as? But what's going to burst is not just the AI bubble now. AI is going to burst, but so is the dollar. So is the dollar hegemony. So too is the structure of finance that we've been used in the integrated way. So is the whole idea to some degree of globalization, because people are going to be talking about resilience now. And resilience means you aren't dependent upon an unreliable political partner. And who is the next unreliable political partner? So globalization is a threat. We're going to go through this period of massive transition. The issue here is, and let's be blunt about it,
my guest is Richard Murphy, the prominent British political economist, chartered accountant, and campaigner known for his work on tax justice and funding the future. He's also the Emeritus Professor of Accounting Practice at the University of Sheffield Management School. Richard is a highly active commentator, blogging daily at Funding the Future and on his YouTube channel, which has seen significant growth, reaching over 325,000 subscribers and 30 million views by the end of 2025. Okay, guys, I need a very big favor from you. If you are watching on YouTube, please make sure you hit the subscribe button, because that makes a massive difference for our podcast. It literally costs you nothing other than a split-second click. But if you're also watching or listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, make sure that you give us a follow there. But in order for it to count, you also need to leave us a review. Please feel free to give us whatever review you think that it's fair, but it's important that you do, because otherwise they don't count your following. Why? I have no idea. But that's just how it is. So I'll really, really appreciate it if you do that. And now, without further ado, let's get back to the episode. Thank you so much for joining the podcast. Yeah, it's got really great pleasure having you here, because I've been listening to your podcast, podcast from YouTube. I mean, quite, I wouldn't say religiously, but you publish stuff every day. So I kind of watch things quite regularly, because for me, understanding economics is important. But what I like about you, and in fact, you actually remind me very much of a good friend of our show, Scott Lucas, where even though he's specialized in politics, but he always connects the dots beyond the politics and how it's all relevant to our day-to-day lives. You're doing exactly the same thing, but from the economics perspective, where you're connecting, the politics, obviously economics, and of course the craziness that we see today. That we're recording this video on 20th of January. So that's the whole Greenland situation, because I had so many questions for you in relation to AI bubble, but things happened since we planned this session. I've just thrown away all the questions. So let's start. Let's start with where we are today economically. But before we go there, I would just, for the listeners who don't live in the UK, they're probably not familiar with your name, because you've been a very avid campaigner for taxation, equality, economics, etc., for quite a long time. So people in the UK should have heard your name by now, but those who are not, probably they don't know. So let's start with who you are. Why did you start doing the work that you do on YouTube? We had a chat about that earlier, but yeah, so take it from there. So how did this whole journey of your economic campaigning start?
Okay, that's a long story, because I'm 67, nearly 68. And therefore I'm an old age pensioner in the UK. And in fact, technically I am retired from university work now. I'm an emeritus professor. I've had a very odd career. I got fascinated by economics as a teenager. In the books that are behind me, there are some which date back to the mid-70s or even slightly earlier, when I was first reading about green economic growth and the constraints on our planet. Bizarrely, that's still a theme of my work now. I went to university. I studied economics. I decided to become an accountant because I wanted to see how business worked, and economists don't do that. So I mixed the disciplines. I worked for what is now KPMG in London from 1979 to 1983. Then I went off to another little firm, which was a very interesting experience. Let's just leave it like that. And then I set up my own firm of accountants, which was a fascinating experience. When people tell me you don't know how business works, well, I've actually created quite a lot, including a firm of accountants. But I was also the founder, entrepreneur behind a number of other activities as well, some of which employ quite a lot of people and set up factories. I've helped people create creative studios, all sorts of mainly creative stuff. So that was a fascinating period. But when I reached about 40, I realized that life was going to change. I'd always been committed to equality. I think there's an element in that explained by the fact that I'm a twin. My twin and I didn't ever have an independent existence. You learn to share when you're a twin because your first 9 months, which most of us get alone with our mums, we didn't do that. We shared. And it's an odd, I don't know what life is like, not as a twin, but you do actually come out with this perception that the world is there to be shared. And you're very, when you're very young, everything is shared. And we're very different guys, incredibly different guys. We don't look alike. We do sound a bit alike. Otherwise, he's gay, I'm straight, and everything else is different. And yet I love this guy dearly. He's completely different to me, and he really matters. And that has become a driving force in a sense. I didn't know that at the time, but I now look back and think that probably influenced my sense of justice. That was always very powerful. My sense of the importance of recognizing people as who they are. I suffered racial prejudice when I was young because of my surname. It's unusual to be white male and suffer racial prejudice, but I've got an Irish surname. I've been taken in for special discussions with passport officers before now, even at the time that I had a World Bank visa going into the USA. There's a very nasty guy called Richard Murphy somewhere, apparently once in the IRA. And so I learned a lot of things about that. But at 40, I realized I wanted to do something different. A, I had children, very mad thing to do. And B, I gave up my secure income as senior partner of a firm of accountants. Completely balmy thing to do. Thankfully, I had an understanding wife. And we set out to create, really, I wanted to write to change some things. For the 15 years, everything was largely about tax and economic justice to do with tax and helping developing countries collect the revenues that they were owed. And I did a lot. I created the concept of country-by-country reporting. Country-by-country reporting is the mechanism now required of all multinational companies to report their use of tax havens to their tax authorities. So the secrecy that these places had was shattered. I helped deliver that. These places now have to deliver information on which people who are foreign nationals get their income in tax havens. And that means that the countries in question can ask their resident people, why have you got a bank account in Cayman, in Jersey, wherever it might be? I helped deliver that. So I made a big change to the world of tax, but I'd done that for a long time. And I was invited to be an academic, so I became a professor. I haven't got a PhD, which is odd for a professor, but I don't. I could have a PhD because I published plenty enough papers, which are well enough ranked, to be submitted as a PhD, but when you're a professor for life, you can't be bothered to get the doctorate anymore, I guess. I'm not being totally silly when I say that. There were better uses of my time always. I became very interested in then the whole nature of political economy. I've been doing political economy for 15 years on the tax work. I'd negotiated with the UN, the IMF, the World Bank, the OECD, with governments. Literally. And sometimes when they said to me, well, who are you negotiating for? I said, well, I come from my spare bedroom. But I was sitting there negotiating literally at the OECD, for example, with the US on country-by-country reporting. It was a fascinating experience. Just on the basis of the power of ideas. Nothing else. That was all that I had going for me. I created this thing and I was going to argue my way for it. And since then, I've argued for economic equality more because tax is not the only component. I switched sides. I looked at money in depth. I looked at modern monetary theory in depth. And I see tax and modern monetary theory as the flip side of each other. You can't understand one without understanding the other. Money and tax are equals and opposites. I looked at government. I looked at how government can be a great thing. And I do believe it can be a great thing. I looked at how it can create fair markets and deliver the foundations of prosperity, and how it can also destroy those things. So I'm interested in how the whole thing, as you say, sort of knits together. I'm not interested in pure theory. I'm interested in reality. I'm interested in how we make the world a better place. I'm interested in politics, as I call it, a politics of care, where people are more important than anything else and where everybody gets a chance. And for that, I'll go back again to my twin. Different guys, different career strategies, different places in life, different sexual orientations, different everything. But we needed the same opportunities, was my view. And that's the foundation of my economic thinking, really.
I'm sure we can all agree that we live in a highly complicated information ecosystem, but also a highly biased information ecosystem. An ecosystem that is filled with vested interests, clickbaits, ideologies. But as an entrepreneur, decision maker, and indeed podcaster, it's super important for me to be able to dig through the stories beyond all that shadow of all the other nonsense. And I cannot tell you how frustrated I am when I see biased coverage when it comes to things like the environment, health, business, and indeed artificial intelligence, which is my key field of work. And as a neurodivergent person, it's always a huge challenge for me to patiently try and find unbiased approach to the story. And this is why I was so grateful to discover a tool called Ground News. Ground News is a phone app and a web app that offers clarity in an increasingly chaotic media landscape that we see today. And they offer quite a few different tools, but one of my absolute favorites is the blind spot tool, whereby it looks at the story and who reported that story, be it from the right wing or left wing media, and who owns the media, and what would be the potential vested interest for them to report the story in the way that they do. Even in AI, I see that kind of bias where, for example, left-wing media tend to be gloomy about AI regardless, and right-wing media tend to be overly optimistic and frankly delusional when it comes to AI. Both approaches are pretty dangerous, frankly, and that's why I think this tool is absolutely phenomenal to help you understand the balanced view regardless of the topic that you're interested in. And they're offering a 40% discount on their Vantage plan, which is the top tier that I use personally, that gives you access to all of the tools that you need. And it works out less than $5 a month. It's basically like a cup of coffee a month. So you can go to ceoretort.com/ground news. And by subscribing, you're supporting the podcast, but also you're supporting their independence. As you know, I like to support independent companies. So that's again, ceoretort.com/ground news. And thank you, Ground News, for supporting the podcast. And now back to the episode. No, that's really fascinating. Actually, the point about your twin, that's really interesting, because one of the things that people ask me as well is like, why do I care? Because I also care about all of the elements that you've highlighted. I would say my entire life. And I honestly don't know why. The only thing I can think of, it's that a moment of my childhood, because I grew up in pretty privileged environment. I mean, I lived in Abu Dhabi in the 80s, so luxury, all that lovely stuff. But I never enjoyed it. I don't know why. I mean, like, I hated the people in there that they were like, it was always about them. So look at me. Well, what about the rest of the world? I don't care. Look at me. Look at my Rolex, right? It's that kind of attitude. But the thing that I guess that maybe kind of unscrewed something in my head, that we were on a holiday somewhere. I think it was probably Egypt. And we stayed in this really luxury 5-star hotel or whatever. And it was gated. And Egypt has a lot of poverty, like almost like in India. Yeah, I mean, major poverty. So I remember we were driving out of the gates, and I saw there are people basically begging for stuff, like for money or food or whatever. And at the time I was maybe around 7, 8, something like that. And I saw a little girl on the streets, basically, like no shoes, dirty clothes, she's dirty, etc. And the thing that hit my head at the time, it was like, how come me? I'm a boy, right? And I've got all of this. Yeah, there's a girl who's exactly like me. I mean, I didn't make this, but it wasn't her fault to be poor either. How come she's there, right, in that situation? And my mom was sitting next to me at the time. And I asked my mom, I basically asked her this question: how come
I'm in this situation and that girl is in that situation. And my mom, bless her, she was Russian, half Ukrainian. So basically, she didn't hold back. She's like, we're bloody lucky, and you better never forget that. She didn't say anything like, oh, we worked hard for our money. We worked this, we've done that. She said, nope, you son of a bitch, you're lucky. You better remember that. And that kind of, I think that could be the thing. It's like, it made me feel like, you know what? I'm just a lucky son of a gun. Like everything that we have, it's just pure luck. I never asked for this. I never worked for it. And when I see people say things like, they're complaining about, the people who are unfortunate, it's somehow their fault. And I'm like, you're so silly. You're so silly. And to me, I feel that they just don't understand economics. They don't understand the reasons why this inequality happened. That's why I've been very interested in learning about these things my entire life, reading a lot about these things. It's like trying to understand why, the world is the way it is. And that's why, I always like to read economic books. And that's why, I came across your work for quite a while. And I thought it's fascinating.
I like what you just said, because I can hear sort of resonation from that in my life. I didn't have an experience like that. I was brought up in, sort of middle-class comfort. My parents were professional from very, very poor working class backgrounds, but they made it, and the state had helped them to make it. And that was, they felt precarious. My father was terrified of being out of desire-ish throughout his life. He's dead now. But he was terrified of that, because it wasn't a cool thing to be. It is now, but it wasn't. And so I understood that fear. I understood their sense of wanting to be accepted. It's like almost a migrant. He was effectively from a migrant family, effectively. But my mother's family was very English for generations and generations, I'm sure. But because she was now middle class from a working class background, she again had this same tenuous relationship with the status she now had. And we were brought up in a perfectly normal English middle class house, nothing grand. But there was no doubt that the next meal would arrive. And I knew all of that, and I realized that. And again, like you, I realized that some people didn't have that. My mother taught in a very underprivileged school. And she told us stories all about that when I didn't really see it, although it wasn't far away, and I became aware of it, though, as a result. And that there was real poverty in our neighborhood, effectively. But they did teach one thing, and I think my parents were good at that. They taught us that money was never going to make you happy. You need enough. And I'm not disputing that. Money is important. You need enough to be able to buy the basics of life. You want to be able to feed your children. You want to be able to put a roof over your head. You want some clothes on your back, etc. Let's get all of that out of the way. Of course, you need enough. But at a certain point, you also need your family, you need so your emotional needs have to be met, your intellectual needs have to be met, you have to be able to integrate into the society of which you're part. And even more than that, you have to find what is your purpose for living. And the people who don't never find a purpose for living are never going to actually be truly happy, is mine. What's my purpose for being? My purpose for being is talking about that. My purpose for being is talking about how we can create a fairer world for everyone if we want to reallocate resources for that purpose. That's what motivates me, drives me. I became a Quaker by choice. My parents brought me up as a Christian evangelical. That didn't make any sense to me at all. Let's be blunt about it. It didn't work. I didn't get that way of thinking about religion whatsoever. In my late 30s, I did decide that I was going to explore religion because I felt a need to. And I became a Quaker. I still am a Quaker. I'm not the most serious Quaker. I don't turn up every Sunday morning. But it guides my thinking and principles, and I find that a very nourishing way of thinking. My wife is a Quaker. We married in a Quaker ceremony. Look them up. You'll discover it's the only marriage service where there is no script. You don't know what you're going to do. You don't know what's going to happen. You just agree that at some point you'll swap some vows. That's all that you agree. And then...
That's cool.
But that sort of reflected this. But the key point there is, much as I think money is important, money isn't everything. And you've got to remember the rest. And that's what you understood at the age of 7 or 8, I guess, that there was a difference, that, this girl had a right to material well-being, spiritual well-being, emotional well-being, intellectual well-being. And if she was being denied that, in a sense, you were being hurt by that denial. And I think that's true. I think that if we do deny people the opportunity to flourish, we actually hurt ourselves, because somewhere deep down we know that we are dependent upon others. None of us exist in isolation. We're not sitting here, as two people who now are unentangled. It's why I find the concept of entanglement in physics so interesting. We are entangled. We're entangled with the people around us, the communities we live in, the people who are there. How can we pretend otherwise? So that's really important. This helps inform my concept of economics. There is no such thing as this person who made it on their own. The tech bros are not made by their own efforts. The system makes them, the government helps them protect their property rights. Unless you understand these relationships, power, and how they impact on lives, you don't really get economics. And standard neoliberal economics, the stuff that is taught by 92% of all university teachers, it is thought, doesn't get that. It's talking simply about a formulaic system of allocation of resources based upon profit maximization and income maximization. Well, I have prepared many thousands of sets of accounts in my life. I have run quite a number of real businesses. I've employed a lot of people. I have no idea what profit maximization means. And the reason why I don't know what profit maximization means is the economist concept of profit maximization is about literally the discounted value of the future cash flows that I'm going to generate as a result of the activities that I undertake. And I don't know what those cash flows are, because the future is not mine to know. And the accountant's concept of profit is based upon past recognition of income less costs, broadly speaking, having allowed for movement in the value of assets, some of which are stated at market value. But it's a very, very confusing world, because we have two fundamentally different measures called profit, which don't equate to each other. One is the future, and one is the past, the accountant and the economist. And I happen to have been a professor of both, which is particularly bizarre. I don't know anybody else in the UK who's managed that. I was a professor of political economy. I'm now a retired professor of accounting. But there is this fundamental conflict between the two systems, and they speak a language. It's often said that America and the UK are divided by a common language. I think they're divided by a lot more right now. But that's one of the things they're divided by. And so are accountants and economists. So profit maximization is meaningless. And anyway, suppose the CEO of a large corporation is meant to be maximizing their profit. Well, Elon Musk wouldn't then be asking for $1 trillion out of whichever corporation he's been granted it by, because that isn't profit maximizing for the corporation. That's profit maximizing for Elon Musk. You immediately get the tension of power in this relationship. Is he a CEO, or is he Elon Musk? Is he the company, or is he not? Where's his duty light? And all of these things are questions to which conventional economics has no answers. Just none at all. They aren't there. And so that's why I question the whole system and try to look at it in a different way. And you'll find that on my Funding the Future blog, by the way, even more than on the YouTube channel. I mean, the YouTube channel is just Richard J. Murphy. That was really originally titled. I worked hard to find the name for that one. But Funding the Future used to be called Tax Research UK, but it's not about tax most of the time now. And most people aren't interested that much in tax anymore on my blog. So we look at these questions around political economy. And political economy is much more interesting than economics in this sense. And that's why I look at things like, we were going to talk about AI bubble, the state of the world. That's why I look at things in a different way, because I see these power relationships, which to me matter. And that's what I do. I'm looking at always at who's got the power. How does that change the allocation of resources in the world? Is it better for allocating resources to Elon Musk or to millions of kids who are living in poverty?
So when did this start, this disconnect? Because obviously people talk a lot about the broligarchs. I would say in the last maybe 10 years. So we've seen this sort of behavior mostly in Silicon Valley. Now, obviously that did exist even before that. But it seems that right now, that money grab at any cost, that power grab, really started perhaps 2016. Maybe it's the Donald Trump effect. I have no idea. But from your point of view, when did that disconnect started to materialize? Because obviously it was always there, but I guess people weren't paying attention, perhaps?
Oh, the disconnect began in May 1979.
Oh, wow,
Margaret
okay,
Thatcher.
that's very specific. Well, it's her, isn't it?
It's Margaret Thatcher was elected as Prime Minister of the UK, and of course Reagan then followed as president in the USA, and they brought into the power structure the thinking of Hayek and Friedman. And Friedman's argument was the business of business is doing business, and profit maximization is the thing that business must do, and business that doesn't profit maximize is not serving the interests of society. And Hayek believed that government was a bad thing and all forms of government were a threat to freedom. When in fact, and let's be honest about this, as far as I can see, my freedoms are fundamentally based upon the fact that the government will uphold the rule of law, and we are seeing right now around the world that is not happening.
Yes.
And when the rule of law is not upheld, we resort to thuggery and violence, and that's not fair. Far from it. So, but that was the logic that came in. Now, let's go right back into history. Of course, there was feudalism, and there was, you can look at Victorian England, and you can look at the oligarchs in America around the turn of the 19th into the 20th century, and the power, the Rockefellers and the JP Morgans and so on, then the individuals who literally terrorizing US society in a sense, and US business with their threats, and it was pretty violent stuff. But if we look at the modern era, the post-Second World War era, we came out of the Second World War with what was undoubtedly a new consensus that is basically falling apart this week. I mean, as we write, who knows what's going on at this moment? I haven't checked my phone for 20 minutes. There might be another event going on that we don't know about. So seriously worrying, it's moving that fast. But that post-war consensus was built upon an agreement between FDR, President Roosevelt, and Churchill that we were going to have an Atlantic Charter. This was going to be based upon non-invasion. This was going to be based upon mutual defense. This was going to be based upon upholding the rule of law and democracy. And the aim was going to be a post-war delivery, and not in the way that Churchill found he delivered it in the UK originally, but it was going to deliver better social well-being, because the promise after World War I, particularly in the UK, was that we were going to build a land fit for heroes, and we most certainly didn't. And it was realized that unless we did really build a land fit for heroes after World War II, then we were going to go back to all the crises that had resulted in World War II. Fascism would rise because the promise was not fulfilled and people had sacrificed to get the gain. And so that's what existed. And that was underpinned by Keynesian thinking. Of course, Keynes was dead by the time this was being brought into use. And in fact, Keynesian economics, as underpinned this, was not what Keynes wrote. I know a bit about Keynes. I'm sure the guy's up there somewhere. Look, there he is. I still got my rather battered university undergraduate copy of John Maynard Keynes, The General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money. Interesting. And this was literally my university copy. I've still got it. But the point about it is that Keynes created this construct, which he realized was about political economy and not just about finance. The interesting thing about this book, and it is really interesting, you would actually see as I flick through it, can you see all the mathematical formula coming up page by page by page? No? He didn't write in formula. Modern economics is all formula, literally nothing else. But he hardly bothered because he was interested in narrative explanation for the benefit of people and what was required. So this created the post-war consensus where there was this sense we're working for the common good. And executive pay was good. I mean, you could live in luxury, but you weren't living in excessive luxury. And we built 500,000 homes in the UK when there were 40 million people living in the country. There's now 67 million people living in the country, and we can't manage to build about 200,000 homes a year. It's crazy that what we can't do that we could do. Because we aren't meeting social need. And we created the welfare state, which has been eroded since 1980. So there was this massive change, but then we get to 2008, and we jumped a long way. But the whole thinking from 1997, mid-90s onwards, was that neoliberalism must have its day, that government could not be trusted. Central bank independence is a measure of the fact that governments can't be trusted. We must outsource the control of monetary policy from government. We leave fiscal policy with government. I said earlier, money and tax are the flip side of each other. So now we're going to manage money in central banks and we're going to manage tax in government. And are we going to manage to coordinate the two? Sure as heck we're not. We're going to get absolutely wrecked economic policy as a consequence. That's what happened. That was the inevitable consequence of this split. Completely bizarre because they are fundamentally entangled with each other. But that's what happened. This was an assault on democracy. It happened everywhere. It's now seen as a linchpin. Trump is almost right to say the Fed should not be independent. Hate to say it, but he had to be right sometime, stop clock rule and all that. Eventually there had to be a moment when he might have hit onto some sort of truth for all the wrong reasons. But this idea that government was bad, markets were good, was allowed to run riot from the mid-90s onwards, and it escalated with the freedom, the end of the Glass-Steagall Act under Bill Clinton in the States, the separation of high street banking and investment banking so that there was now the ability to use the safe depositors' money for speculative purposes, which did end up kind of badly in 2008. And same here in the UK. Gordon Brown liberated the city, as Margaret Thatcher had also done in a different iteration earlier, and it all came back to bite us very hard in the bum. But what happened in 2009 was that the state bailed out the banks. We did quantitative easing. Quantitative easing was necessary. It was a sham. Quantitative easing, the whole of it was a sham. The government just created money, as modern monetary theory says it can. But it disguised that through a form of banking operation called quantitative easing, where bonds were issued and repurchased, which was wholly unnecessary, completely to give a cut to the banks. And that process eventually ended up with basically the recapitalization of their balance sheets, the banks being provided with, in the UK, nearly £900 billion worth of funding to ensure that they had deposits which they could hold to guarantee they could never fail with regard to payments to each other again. And the government, which created those deposits, literally created and effectively gifted them to the banks, then paid interest on them. 445 billion a year of subsidy to the banking system. So what we got, and your timing is sort of right, suddenly the bankers realized that we can have a crash and we can actually get richer as a result. The rest of the world is on stagnant wages. House prices are static. House prices are not static, but people's ability to pay for them is growing. So they actually extended the amount of credit that people would have to take on and the burden on them to buy the houses. Wages were, broadly speaking, static, which is what I meant to say. But it wasn't for bankers. It was possible to extract more and more rent. But fundamentally, the reason why we ended up with this situation is the extraction of rent. And so for example, let's just use tech, IT, now AI, as the example. I used to buy tech when I started. I bought my first PC in 1983. It was a lovely apricot. It was beautiful. It looked better than probably any computer I've ever had since, but it had two 5.25-inch floppy drives. One had the operating system on it and the other had the data on it. And you had to put them in the right order, of course, because otherwise you got all sorts of mess ups. This thing was crazy, but I could do a spreadsheet, 256 lines long. I could do financial modeling on that computer in a way that I could never do it any other way you can imagine. And I was relatively young still at the time, but I embraced this thing from on. And my firm never, ever had a typewriter. It never had a calculator. It only had computers. We did everything from the outset on computers. That was massively different. We were way out profitable compared to everybody else as a result. I didn't have an embarrassment about making money because I used technology to my advantage. But I bought the tech. I bought the programs. Now what do I have to do? I rent them. Every program I buy, I basically rent. I don't buy the license and it's mine in perpetuity. If I don't pay Microsoft next year, I can't have Microsoft 365, whatever the version I have now is. I can't remember. Office, whatever. But I pay a rent. I buy, stuff from Apple. It's always a rent. I buy Adobe. God, it's a rip-off. Sorry, Adobe, but you really are taking the piss on the prices you charge. And this point is clear that we now always rent everything. We rent all our cars. 90% of all cars in the UK are rented. Everything has a finance cost implicit within it. We're paying interest, we're paying charges, we're paying rents. This is about extracting profit from working people. working people's incomes might rise, but actually the capacity to pay those or the capacity to have a good life based upon that income is constrained by the desire to pay rent, whether that be literally for housing or via the interest rate on your mortgage for housing, or whether it is because so much of what you live on is rented, your phone, your everything. And this is the economy that changed. We are now living in a world which exists apparently to extract rent from us all the time. And AI is just another iteration of this. What is AI going to end up as? I'm already paying ChatGPT and Claude for subscriptions. Why? Because I think they're interesting. I want to know how they work. Every now and again, they do something which is useful for me, and half the time I end up swearing at them, bluntly. It's a really good trick. Tell ChatGPT, I'm fed up with you. I'm going to go and see Claude. It immediately improves the performance. I genuinely have done that, and I get the answer I've been looking for. It's just bizarre. It will actually edit something in the way I want. When I tell it I'm going off to see Claude to do this. But
actually, I'll try that. I didn't try that. I did not think of that. Yeah, I'll try that.
It's really silly, but it's not just me who's done this. And that she says, yeah, it gets upset. It does recognize that what you're threatening to do is take away the business. Yeah, obviously there's no person there, but it obviously must be programmed to recognize this, whatever it is. But the point is they want rents. And AI, will it extract rents to justify the investment? No, I can't see it. I read a report this morning. I subscribe to newsletters on AI, and apparently AI revenues have now reached $20 billion a year. How much are we spending on AI right now? Is it $7 trillion or something? For $20 billion of revenue? When I say that there's going to be an AI crash, I mean there's going to be an AI crash because that is a ratio that doesn't stack in my head as an accountant, as an economist, as somebody who just stands back and looks at the world, somebody who can do sums. I actually am at Sheffield University Management School. Everywhere else is the University of Sheffield except the management school. We are Sheffield University Management School because the initials stand for sums. It's very corny, but I think it's true. We can do sums. Now, those sums don't add up. And AI doesn't add up to me at any level. And that's what worries me about it. And I do wonder whether AI is where the road for neoliberalism runs out simultaneously to the moment where the road to the supposed freedom from government that neoliberalism is meant to provide is running out in the form of Donald Trump, where clearly, where's the freedom? When you have something that looks rather like a private
dictatorship.
It looks like dictatorship. I mean, Robert Reich is calling him a fascist. He's calling him a dictator, and he's saying that ICE is the Gestapo. Am I going to argue with Robert Reich on this issue? Because, he's a man who's been in the US government 3 times, I think, and been around a bit. He's nearly 80. That makes me look like a mere youngster. Yeah, I think he's right. I've been calling Trump a fascist for a long time there.
Well, I think many of us who keep paying attention called him that because, for me, this is the thing I don't understand. And in fact, one of the reasons why I was keen to bring you and bring somebody like Scott Lucas as well, because I think, everything that you've described, if you were to ask a regular person, they would agree with you. Yeah, for some reason, if you say to somebody, oh, I'm a conservative, or I'm a Labour supporter, or a Democrat, or whatever, it's like somehow something changes in the brain. I'm like, it's like, I don't get, this is why I hate party politics. I mean, I tell people, not that I'm apolitical, sort of sitting on the fence. I don't sit on the fence. I see myself as a liberal. I believe in equality, like what we talked about. I believe in all of these things. If that labels me as liberal or woke or whatever, fine, whatever. I don't really care. It's common sense, right? But what I don't understand, it's over. Maybe, I mean, I've noticed it definitely more since the whole Brexit and the MAGA movement when it started in 2016, that people just became religiously associated with whatever ideology or label. It's like as if that is more important than logic, be it economic logic, political logic, or whatever. And I think now, we're seeing the outcomes of that because basically they allowed grifters and charlatans to take over the narratives. Remember, Michael Gove here in the UK said, we've had enough experts. Yeah, hence shit hit the fan. It's like if you don't listen to experts, what do you think is going to happen?
It was quite an extraordinary comment. Quite an extraordinary comment to say we've had enough of experts.
I know.
Because,
and he was a government minister.
Yeah. He certainly wasn't an expert in education. He did massive harm, let's be honest. He didn't listen to experts. And I know a lot of teachers who would agree that he did massive harm. And indeed, I saw that at the end of my career as a professor. We were having people who were coming through the system and Gove had failed them by what he was requiring that they learn. But look, this religious aspect of this is quite important because it is being taught as religion. These things are being taught as these are articles of faith. These aren't rational. And it is.
We see that with AI. We even see that with AI. People religiously believe in AI.
Yeah, it comes from the removal of agency, in my opinion. I mean, when somebody loses their agency, their freedom to be themselves, their freedom to express, their freedom to participate, and that's what is happening. I mean, and it's happening to large numbers of people in the UK. They don't have enough money to be able to participate in society. They can't have the things that they see on television that they are meant to own to be a proper member of the world in which they live, whether that's the right trainers, the right phone, the right car, the whatever, the right holiday, which is rammed down their throat all the time by media all around them. When they are denied the chance to work, when their work is denied meaning, we've got an awful lot of bullshit jobs, as the late David Graeber would have described them, in this country, when people basically are therefore told you're just a functionary inside this system, which is intended to deliver for an elite. And Nigel Farage is part of that elite, but he denies it, of course. But that elite is clearly what you are servicing. Then people get angry. And the substitute for their personal agency and freedom is the belief in a system of government which is effectively authoritarian, put forward by somebody like Trump or like Farage, who says, I will free you from the oppression which you are suffering. And the people rightly think, I am suffering oppression because they are. The system has done that. That is what Hayek and Friedman delivered via Thatcher and Reagan and their spread. That is what the consequence of that pernicious thought of thinking was. And when people are suffering in that way, they look for somebody who is their salvation, their savior. And they've looked to the far right with very simplistic, very naive solutions, saying, well, if you vote for me, I will end all wars. Do you remember that? Only just over a year ago? Ukraine was going to be solved in 24 hours, was it not? Mysteriously, It's now gone on longer than the Eastern Front War from 1941 to 45. Russia has been at war longer in Ukraine than it was against Germany in World War II. Extraordinary fact.
It is.
Has Israel been solved? No, not at all. Nothing's been solved.
No.
It's still going on. The clearance is still happening.
It's even worse. It's even worse.
It's just been forgotten about at the moment. Yeah, and now they're talking about clearing Gaza. Where do the Palestinians go? Not my problem, but there must be plenty of places where they can go, according to Donald Trump. That's the end of it. Yeah, a few million people, I can relocate them, no problem. But that's not what the issue is. They want to live where they are. That's their homeland as much as it's Jewish homeland. They're all Semite people. Let's be clear about that. So this is this denial of agency through an economic system that is deliberately designed to create hierarchies of power, that has created this intensely divided society in which extremism has grown. So Hayek's idea that government was going to be the road to serfdom, completely wrong. It's the absence of government, the desire for freedom from government that is actually creating this pernicious outcome.
But then also now, if we're looking at America, because in terms of the agency, now we're moving into this era, which is, by the way, it's bullshit for me from the AI perspective, this idea that AI is replacing jobs. But now the government is funding companies and people like Elon Musk that effectively promoting the idea that, now we're going to, the AI and robots can replace your jobs. We're going to have millions of humanoids, which is the most useless robots ever. But it doesn't matter. It's about replacing people's jobs. And I'm thinking to myself, well, okay, you're literally destroying your own narrative. Like, people going to do what? If you're taking jobs away from people, what's next? Oh, UBI. But you don't want to charge taxes. Who's going to pay for the UBI? It's like, it's crazy.
I mean, they have not, I mean, let's be clear that the stories around Henry Ford and paying enough money to buy the Model T, etc., are a little bit of good PR by Henry Ford, who wasn't a particularly nice man, if truth be told. But let's live with that. There was an element of truth to this idea that if he makes a product aimed at the mass market, which the mass market can't afford to buy, he's got a problem. He required volume, and volume required that enough people could buy the product coming down the line, and the only way you could do that was by paying people enough to buy the product. And I think that's true. We're now at the point where the people who are doing AI are saying there is no known new product from AI so far. I'm told, we're going to get some new medicines. Hang on a minute. A medicine for what? A medicine probably, because, let's look at what medical research does these days. There probably is going to be a great deal of AI-driven medical research into receding male hairlines. That's not a subject of any concern to those on this blog, this post.
I've been waiting for it. I've been waiting for that.
But are we actually going to see something really revolutionary, which is actually going to make genuine issues, like how do we solve, endometriosis for women? Is that going to solve it? Because that's a curse on real lives, or whatever else. That's not the issue for research because there's no money in it, etc. So AI is not genuinely going to solve something other than create, frankly, new bullshit, I suspect, medical solutions, which aren't really necessary. You can live with the receding hairline. It's possible. I've got one. I can live with it. It's getting worse. I can live with it.
It's a style. It's a style. It's a style.
It's a style. I might have to go. My twin has got that hairstyle. Yours. Exactly. So maybe I'll have to go that way one day. But the point I'm making is I don't see where the products are coming from. I don't see where the new growth in the economy is coming from. I don't see where the revenues are coming from, apart from more rents, and more rents being paid by people who are not going to have the income because they're going to be made unemployed or at least vulnerable to it, and therefore will have lower resilience and therefore a higher degree of caution and therefore a higher propensity to save and therefore a lower propensity to consume and therefore less spending in the economy. And where does this end up? A massive waste of money on AI because, let's ignore at the moment that the planet can't provide the energy and the water. Actually, it will not literally even be able to pay the AI rents on ChatGPT and so on because the people will be out of work and they'll realize what's going on. And it doesn't even necessarily replace jobs because you've only got to use this stuff reasonably and realize it can be useful, but it isn't that useful. And I'm always told, don't be stupid, Richard. That's just not, it's just because it's not good enough as yet. It can't mimic you perfectly. Yeah, okay. Maybe not. But do I want it to be able to mimic me perfectly? I was literally doing a training session on how to write an not an AI post, a social media post yesterday. I talked about the difference between journalism and opinion writing for a blog post, of which I've done a lot. 24,000 or something, and for a YouTube video, of which I've done quite a lot, but not that many. But I've still done a lot. And I talked about, you've got to make the thing up. You've got to work out what this whole thing is going to be about. You've got to work out what the hook is, and you've got to know where you're going. And I explained it's a bit like a journey. A bit like a walk. Imagine you invite a friend to go on a walk. What's the hook, the thing that gets them in? We're going to go on a walk and we're going to start from X and we're going to go to Y. So X is the hook and Y is the conclusion. The route that you're going to pass on the way are the facts you're going to explore. And why you choose that route and not another route is the argument you're going to make as to why these facts are better than the alternative. Now, that's the whole thesis on which you can produce every single opinion article ever written and every single YouTube video ever written. You're going on a walk, and why do you want the person to actually stay with you on this walk? Because the appeal for funding is at the end. Very cynical on my part, I said. But the point...
It's honest. It's honest.
But it was honest. But the point I'm making is that I don't see how AI is going to come up with the hook and with the conclusion. It may be able to help you with some of the choices of route, and it may be able to help you once you've mechanically set the parameters for your decision via, this is where I'm starting, this is where I want to end, please fill in the gap. It can help you do that. It will be able to help explain why this route to your destination is better than that route to your destination. And it will be able to obviously change the style and God knows what on the way. But if you don't know why you're writing the piece, there's no point asking Chat, GPT, Claude, or anybody else, because you've got to know what you're doing. And at the moment, we live in an economy where most people have no idea what they're doing. And I know I've got to make a move fairly soon, but let me sort of summarize this in the context of AI, because we were meant to be talking about AI on this conversation, and we haven't done very much. What really worries... Well, it sort of and it is. But simultaneously, I see two parallel crises, and AI is one indicator of this, and Donald Trump and Greenland are the others. And Greenland isn't the end of it, of course, because I don't think Greenland is he's just a marker on the route. It's Canada, it's Mexico, it's wherever next. He wants the Western Hemisphere to be under US control. This is the Monroe Principle updated as far as he's concerned. It is now called the Dunroe Principle, which is really horrible. But the point is that the AI and Trump are absolutely linked. They are neoliberalism that has run out of ideas. There is nothing left for it to offer. There is no product innovation, and this is really important. When I look back, I'm very interested in transport history. I actually got into economics and accounting because I was interested in transport. And if you think there's some books behind me here, I tell you, there's another room which is absolutely book-lined with transport history. I read that stuff and crazy. I mean, this is my geekdom coming out of me. I know it is. But when you start off, you look at what happened over the last couple of 100 years. We got the steam engine, we got transport, we had an agricultural revolution as a consequence, we had an industrial revolution as a consequence, we got machinery, we then got electricity, we then transformed the power in a different way altogether to travel. We then got the car, and from the car, we changed again the nature of the idea of personal freedom. And from the car, we moved on, and then in the particularly 50s and 60s, we got female emancipation. What was the biggest source of female emancipation? Actually, the washing machine and the Hoover, because the woman could now go out to work because she didn't have to spend all day slaved literally in the home by a husband who wanted her to keep the place neat and tidy because that's what social mores said she should do. She could do that and go out. Okay, she ended up working many more hours than her husband did, but that's what happened. And so we got social transformation, then we got the computer, then we got the phone, and now, we got AI. Hang on a minute. All those previous ones, I can see why we did them. We wanted to move. We wanted to clean the home. We wanted to have lights on. We wanted to have a product. What does AI give me? A rewritten version of an article I've already written or a really stupid meme. Yeah? Is that enough to despoil the world with? Is this your great big idea? And okay, it's going to fill in some forms. Well, we've been automating form filling in for quite a while. Forever. But it's not revolution, is it? This isn't a big change. So, guys, what is AI? It's the indication that literally neoliberal capitalism has run out of ideas. It's got no new ways it can think of to extract rents from us, in other words. That's what I mean by the end of the road for neoliberal capitalism, which is a rent extraction system. It means that your income, gross income, splits three ways now. Partly in tax. Yeah. Bluntly, I know I'm going to pay a third or so, or maybe more of my income in tax, roughly. Call it a third. I'm going to pay quite a lot in rent to various people who want to take money off me, either for property or for the hire of everything. And then I'm going to have my freedom, but it's relatively small freedom now. And that's the problem. They've taken too much We've got insufficient freedom left. And government, at the same time, which was supposedly going to provide us with freedom, that was the neoliberal ideology. Thatcher would have said, Reagan would have said, this is about freeing people from the clutches of the state so they have more opportunity to make their own choices. And instead, what are we seeing? ICE on the streets of Minneapolis, denying people the chance to live their own lives without fear, because they won't even risk getting in their car, particularly if they're Latino or black or whatever else. But frankly, Renee Good was a white woman and was killed. They're too frightened to go out. And that's the end destination of neoliberal government. Neoliberalism is at the end of its road. The question is, what do we do next? Do we have might and money, which is what the politics of neoliberalism is, or do we have a politics of what I call care, where we actually refocus on the needs of people again? And that's the choice that actually I think is going to come to the forefront. It's going to be pretty painful, I suspect, making that transition. I do think there's going to be a cost. I don't know that Trump is going to let us get off this without some form of at least very deep economic warfare, creating a recession, creating serious numbers of casualties in terms of people who are literally not going to be able to afford to make ends meet and will therefore economically suffer great harm, even if there is no outright warfare. I think there is going to be that risk. We are going to live through a horrible few years coming up. That's, I'm afraid to say, what I think is going to happen, and it's wholly unnecessary. But at the end of it, we need to come out with a consensus like we did in 1945 in the UK and in the USA, which was, and of course elsewhere, therefore, as a consequence, which was, we're going to build a better world. We've got to build a better world. That's what I write about. That's what I talk about. That's what I've come to talk to you about. It wasn't what was on our agenda, but you threw out the questions. You let me set the agenda. And that's where I've got to. That's my conclusion.
Yeah. No, well, but I agree with you, because for me, as a final point, because until this, maybe today, maybe this week, my belief has always been that the economy has been so dependent on AI unnecessarily, right? But if you look at the markets, effectively, it's all entirely dependent on the valuation of the so-called Magnificent Seven. I mean, yeah. And there's nothing else. But the arguments that I've been making for quite a while, maybe since 2024, I think, that basically Trump is the guy who's going to prop up the AI market. I mean, like, no matter what happens, the bullshit will collapse, whatever. It doesn't matter. He'll bail them out, etc. But as you highlighted, I think Trump himself now is the problem.
Yes.
It's like, because the whole stuff with Greenland, the whole stuff, with ICE and etc. I'm like, okay, so basically now Trump himself is creating an economic instability for America and the world. So, and AI has no money effectively, really. And so if Trump is the one who's going to screw it up, I mean, is it really an AI bubble now, or is it basically the Trump bubble? It's the bubble
like
of the whole economic.
But what's going to burst is not just the AI bubble now. AI is going to burst, but so is the dollar. So is the dollar hegemony. So too is the structure of finance that we've been used in the integrated way. So is the whole idea to some degree of globalization, because people are going to be talking about resilience now. And resilience means you aren't dependent upon an unreliable political partner. And who is the next unreliable political partner? So globalization is a threat. We're going to go through this period of massive transition. The issue here is, and let's be blunt about it, in 1945, in the UK, we had Keynes, and he dominated even in the States. And you then have major thinkers in the States, Paul Samuelson, followed by perhaps people like Ken Galbraith, and people like that who actually could take this idea forward in the popular narrative and turn it into teaching material and get it out there. And in the UK, we had somebody called William Beveridge, who wrote the Beveridge Report, which of course underpinned the whole creation of the social security system, and therefore provided the freedom from fear, which was the message of the post-war Labour government, even if it was then replaced by Tories for 15 years. That it didn't change. There was a unity around this idea of freedom from fear. At the moment, we haven't got that unity about what comes next, and that's the slightly frightening thing now. But if you'd looked in 1939, there wouldn't have been that unity either. And I'm afraid to say, I've got a video coming out tomorrow morning in which I say I think we're sitting at this moment in July or August 1939. I don't know that we're going to have a war. I hope we're not going to have. I really do hope we're not going to have a conventional war, because that would be just disastrous. But do I think we're going to have a breakdown in order, and we're going to have a breakdown in trade, and we're going to have massive economic consequences of that? Yes, I do. And
in 2026.
Even by the end of 2026. Yeah. 2026 is going to go down as the year when World War III, which is an economic war, basically began. It's not I don't think it's a physical war, because we know full well we can blast ourselves to smithereens if we do physical wars. And I don't think NATO troops are really going to engage with each other, but is there going to be a complete failure? And we do know that the system is so integrated that the opportunity for it to fall apart is just enormous. We hang on all the time by our fingernails, and people don't realize how perilous this system is. It's like we presume our computers work until they don't, and then we discover we have no idea what's going on inside this thing, and we have no idea how to repair it, apart from turning it on and off and turning it on again. If that doesn't work, then we're stuffed. And we're going to find we're stuffed. And this is going to be really difficult. So hang on, folks. It's going to be a rough ride, but the challenge is to create the big ideas. That's what I like to think about. I'm literally trying to create big ideas.
Yeah.
I need to believe in you.
Yes,
I need to believe in you.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Sorry, I've got to go and do some other work.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate your time. Well, we'll be doing this again, I'm sure. And this is the point I want to make to the listeners, that this is the reason why I do what I do. Richard does what he does. It's really about informing you so that you know what we're going to be dealing with. Because at the end of the day, the problem we have, that we haven't got a clue what to do afterwards. That's the problem, isn't it?
We really do need to have a different narrative. I summarize it like this. We need a better song to sing. There was a film which I really like called Educating Rita. It was made in the 1990s. It was set in the 1980s. It was about a working class woman who wanted to find a better song to sing. And the line came when she went to the pub with her family and they were all singing old English pub songs. And she just thought there's got to be something more interesting in life to this. And so she came up with this amazing line, which I've nicked, which is, there must be a better song to sing. And the fact is that neoliberalism is out of tune, and it's run out of notes, and it's run out of chorus. Now we need to find a better song to sing. And that is a song which is about people and care not just for us, but for our planet, because we need to make sure, and I'm old enough to know that I'm going, climate change is not going to have a major impact on me now. A bit, but not major, because, I'm only going to be around for another 20 years or so. This isn't going to be terribly painful for me, but for my children, it's going to be painful. For my grandchildren, I haven't gone it yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if I do one day. I think they're probably going to produce. Then in that case, we're going to end up with a situation where I worry about them. And that's why we need that better song to sing. Go find a better song to sing, and we can create a better world. That's the answer.
Hear, 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 hear. Well, on that note, for the listeners, all the links for Richard's, it will be in the description as usual. But Richard's, absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being part of this podcast. And I know we're going to have, I'll need you to come more regularly, I think, because I think we need to keep an eye on what the hell is going on. But thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
Well, my friends, this is it. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, before I go away, if you are on YouTube, please make sure that you hit the subscribe button below. It really makes a massive difference for the growth of our channel. And if you're following us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you need to give us a star review. Apparently, your following means nothing unless you give us a star review. Don't ask me why, but give us whatever star review that you think is fair. And if you're not following us, what are you doing? Come on, man. It doesn't cost you anything. It really makes a big difference. I really, really appreciate your support. But also, if you've got cash to spare, consider to become a founding member. We are an independent medium. We're not reliant on any kind of company that gets money from Russian oligarchs or any kind of weird sponsorships or anything like that. All of the companies that work with us are genuine companies that I know and I like. But ultimately, it's the members, you guys, our subscribers, our followers, our founding members, or those of you who actually just donated us like $1 here, a couple of bucks there, $5 there. All of that makes a big difference. This is what makes us truly independent. We're not chasing clickbait because we don't want clickbaits. We want facts. We want the truth. We want something that we can all aspire to and something that truly make us at least work harder to make the world a better place. Not just talk about it, but actually make it happen. And of course, it supports all of our campaigns as well. So my friends, thank you so much. Much love. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.